with BSU, and then with TWLF and BSU, and now we're talking during the strike. So I want to thank you all for being here. My name is Laureen Chew. I was a student here during the strike. I did, I got very involved in it, and was a faculty here for too long. But anyway, I've since retired, and it's been giving me great pleasure to bring all of us back, the strikers here today, for our 50th anniversary. And I thank you all for hearing us. Please have questions ready at the end, and please be quick about asking your questions. I would love to hear your life story before the question, but if you can be quick to the questions, then we can get more questions in. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our moderator of this panel, who was one of the leaders of the Black Student Union, Mr. Benny Stewart. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm impressed. I started out this morning, and I see students go kind of in and out, but it makes me feel good that we're at least about 80% still here. So that's great. And we're gonna go through this. And as I roll into it, you guys, just relax, and if you have questions, we're here to answer them to the best of our ability. All right? And I'm first going to address on the 68th strike what caused it and why we went into it. And let me just say, one thing I want you to remember, keep in mind, is that we as students, we were just ordinary students, just like you, ordinary students. But situations and pressure develop us into being smart. It develops us into being courageous. And it develops us into being determined. And that spirit that we had went into the masses of people that followed us. And that's why this was the longest student-faculty strike in American history. Imagine that. Nobody has ever fought to that extent. But we started with very humbling situations. In short, the strike started because 2 years of negotiation was a failure. Jimmy, we went and got Dr. Nathan Hare from the East Coast, brought him in. But after 2 years, that whole 2 years of negotiation yielded 2.5 positions. That's not ethnic studies, that's just black studies. 2.5 positions. And the trustees told us, take it or lump it. They may not have said lump it, but that's what they meant. And so the BSU Central Committee, which had just organized in the spring of 1968, 12 guys organizing, had this task for them to do. And so the word strike came out. We had some young guys. One of them, Leroy Goodwin, I think he said, we're going to strike, and we want, since they were so funky about it, we're going to have our demands, and none of them is negotiated. We want all of them. That's the word I heard from him. I'm sort of like being the chairman, having an engineering attitude. All right, if we shut the campus down, close it up, how is that going to happen? How are we going to do that? And so we begin to organize and talk among ourselves, and we begin to go out and talk to our neighborhood supports that we had given services to, and told them what we're going to try to do. We're calling a strike. But in order to do that, what I want you to realize today is that there was a Third World Liberation Front, but the BSU started out only dependent upon themselves because we had no allies. The Third World Liberation Front was young and it was maturing, and it had fought a battle of sit-ins the semester before. SDS had done that. So when we started out, it was just the BSU. That's it. So when you come down to shutting down a campus, how does that happen? How can you do that? And so the Central Committee got together and they had to do a paradigm mind switch. No more taking over administration buildings. They've done that the semester before, and that's what college students usually do. That wasn't going to work. That was going to involve with a good ass whooping, pardon expression. But it was not going to get the job done, and we had to get that job done. Somebody somewhere stole a book written by Robert Taft. It was called The War of the Fleet. And I got a hold of that book and I got fascinated behind the struggle between a flea and a dog. I had seen that all my life when I was a kid down in LA in the summer. But I didn't pay attention until it got my attention that as long as the flea did not confront the dog head on and kept moving, the dog couldn't deal with him. And so we was able to transform that strategy, which was a protracted strategy, because the flea does a consistent struggle, to something that's more powerful and stronger than it. And then the light bulbs begin to go on. That's how we'll do it. We're not taking over a building. We're going to struggle, but we must make it a continuous struggle. Every day coming back, every day. And that strategy was formed because the group of black students were small. They were small. So we had to make it happen. So as we began to organize it, we came up with the demands to move forward. The first day, November the 6th, over in the main auditorium with the television school, we pulled together about 200 people, community folks, students, and members of the Black Panther Party that was specifically from Marin City. In about an hour and a half, we shut the campus down. We went into classrooms, politicized, and told them to close it down. By the time the administration heard this and called the police, the campus was closed and we was gone and there was no arrest. Just like that. But we sent out a message. We sent out a message. We meant business. And that was the origin of a phenomenal rise of strike. Now the rest of the panel is going to deal with the support and the maintenance of the strike. That brought community people, that brought raising bail money to get people out of jail. Then the back end is going to be the settlement of the strike. And then the last part, Tomasita and I, we're going to address the post-litigation of the strike. All right? So maybe I made it under a minute. Did I, George? Okay. All right. So our first speaker will be George Woo, who at that time was a community person from Chinatown. George.
During the 60s, I started working with youth gangs in Chinatown, and San Francisco State student come in and ask for community support for the strikes. And I supported it, and that's how it got involved. And I always view student as part of the community. I don't understand this artificial delineation that once you become a student, community seems to be something else beyond you. You are part of the community. You go to the community every day, you interact with people in the community every day. So one of the real community support comes from is through the connection of the student. Beyond that, I want to bring you pretty quickly, if you have not attended the past workshops. In the 60s, you had a tremendous amount of activities going on in the United States, namely the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and of course the Black Power movement, in which Black Panther Party was making part of it, on which the San Francisco strike is connected with it. But also the government in 1964 passed the Economic Opportunity Act, and throughout the years have pumped money into the poverty-stricken area to organize poor people for what they call maximum feasible participation of the political structure. So in that sense, most of the community in San Francisco, particularly the community we were concerned with, the low-income community were well-structured, people were well-identified, and that includes Chinatown. And of course, the anti-war movement come about because you have a lot of students in all the college and university who really didn't want to be students. But student deferment was one of the ways to prevent them getting killed. Of course, American youth subsequently spread to all American question whether or not we should stop the war in Southeast Asia. Why are we there killing them and be killing them? So that's the background. So for community support, it's actually pretty easy because education is always one of the issues in our community. So I will speak specifically about the Chinese community. I got involved to the gang work because trying to organize them, to get people to be aware of, to get people to get help, to give them job training. That's education. And I also remember one of the young men who tagged along always wanted to help, and I asked him, why are you hanging around? You dress neatly, you speak good English, you don't have any problem. He said, I want to help. I said, well, stop hanging around with the gangs and go back to college. And that was Fred Lau, who subsequently became chief of police in San Francisco. And I don't know how you feel about the police, but I do think the police have changed because the strike affected a lot of people who ultimately serve in the police department. So our job basically is to go into the community and try to identify groups and leaders and talk to them, ask for help. To my surprise, that was very easy. And we have institutions like Cameron House, people, white MCA people, they all willing to help. In fact, Alan Long, the director of YMCA, was the one that running the school all the time and demonstrate with us. And Larry Jack Baum from Cameron House, also a big supporter. And all this really established our community support. And the next task was to try to deal with the conservative element of the community. As you know, most of the immigrant community are relatively conservative. Their concern is to make a living, to fulfill their American dream. So we spent a lot of time and went to groups, organizations, and speak to them. I just want to highlight one particular interesting group, and people thought that was really a coup during the strike. There's a Economic Opportunity Council developed under the flag of EOC, and it was dominated by majority of the conservative organization in Chinatown, namely the family associations and Chinese Six Company. I think a board of 12, they have 7 seats. So we went, I remember one evening we went into one of the regular meeting and asked them on record to support the San Francisco State Strike and support the 15 demands. And we were pretty much had a bad time with them because they really didn't think we ought to do that until almost at the end, their leader come up and really chewed me out for raising hell too much in the community. And his last sentence was that, why are you people doing all this when I can't even get my grandchild into San Francisco State? Then I stood up and said, we are fighting exactly for that issue. We're fighting to get your kids, your grandkids into school. Do you see the one of the demand? He looked at it and he raised his hand and said, I support it. And then the organizers went on record and support the strike. So that's the kind of work we do, but in general, I recall organizations like Guide, church organizations like Ecumenical Houses were tremendous support of the strike. And later on, of course, we have the union come in to support it, and that really is something we need to pay some attention to. And of course, when we talk about community support, we really are not talking just about the minority community. Actually, the predominantly white community also had quite large support. I think mainly because the issue was right, the time was right, because people raised question why we have such tremendous, supposedly great country, yet we have so many poor people, we have so many powerless people, and of course, why are we engaged in the war in Southeast Vietnam? So we need to pay homage to all those other communities. People quite erroneously think that it was only the third world community come and support the strike. I think it's pretty much a San Francisco effort. And I have to say that what I feel very good about accomplishment was that in the Chinese community, that I was astounded to find there was really no opposition to the strike. There very passive support, but there are also a lot of active support. So I'm sure that that happened in most other communities as well. So in conclusion, I just want to say that we are on the right time with the right issue, and it just being very inclusive about it. And what I learned from that was that we need to coalesce all the people who are concerned with that issue, regardless their value, their political point of view, that we just work on issues that we can get people together and get things done. Thank you.
I'm Ernie Brill. I was on strike. I came from another college. I didn't realize when I came from that other college that I was giving up my student deferment. So in the fall of '65, I got called back to New York City to my draft board, where I had to write down that I'd been arrested, and I had in a civil rights sit-in at my college. And the lieutenant looked at me and he said, "Oh, you have long hair. You're in San Francisco. You're one of those hippies. What, you got to get something against the war?" And I said, "I got everything against the war." And we got to talking, and he said, "I'm not a hippie. You don't see an armband around my head. I don't have any beads. I just like to wear my hair long." We got to talking. He said, "The United States has never been involved in a war where we didn't help people." And I just looked at him. I said, "Why don't we start with the Indians and work our way up?" So I had some background when I came to state. I worked with SNCC a little bit back east in Corps. When I came to San Francisco, it's like I'd come home. It was deja vu. I'd been here before. So I loved it. And I loved that the campus was so diverse, so many different people. But things were changing. I think for a lot of the people, when Dr. King was assassinated, it was in the papers how many African American peoples wept, rioted, protested. But I think, just come to think a little while ago, that thousands, maybe millions of white people were also highly upset and pissed off. And I myself thought, because I was at the March in Washington, I revered Dr. King. I couldn't believe it though, because I could see the other people that had been assassinated. And yet, here the Grateful Dead were playing free concerts in the park. So, for me, that was a huge contradiction. And over the years, I just get infuriated by the media when they do these things on TV about the 60s and show all the big party at Woodstock, come one, come all. Because for me, it started back in the 50s when the bravest people in the country were 14-year-olds trying to get to segregated schools in Little Rock. So the whole history was like a birthplace for misinformation, especially in the schools. And as a high school teacher of 30 years, with uphill struggles for what I would call anti-racist rainbow literature, I can assure you, and in state, I was an English major. We had our little English student union group in a strike. We recruited, it was one of the largest departments in the school. We got a lot of people out. But we also did it by going to the classroom and challenging what was being taught. Like Joseph Conrad, William Faulkner, and having battles with people. Another student who was, of the white students, most of them were just students. There weren't any political group. But every guy, you can be assured, didn't want his ass getting shot up in Vietnam. So a lot of that. And were moral people and couldn't stand what was happening with the war. There was also SDS, which had two groups, Geoge Caucus and the Workers' Student Alliance, which I was a member of, and we had participated in a lot of the worker support on campus. We worked with the farm workers, and they came to our strike. We worked with the big oil chemical workers strike in Richmond. They came to support our strike. But the state was a working class college. There were hundreds of kids who were in unions, either in the student cafeteria, iron workers I had in classes. So, and that was part of the thing where when we fought with the police, it wasn't so easy for some of those police to fight some of us. And they would hold back sometimes. But I also want to say that the people that came from the programs that everybody talked about, those were some of the most dedicated people in the strike. And they came out full-time, just like the people in SDS. Picketing starts at 7 in the morning, it ends at 4. There's a meeting tonight, probably from 8 to 12, or 8 to 11, to plan tomorrow. But the unsung group that nobody really has mentioned is the Iranian Students Association. And they're about 100, 200 students, and they were ferocious, they were strong, they were dedicated, and some of them were risking deportation, getting their green card taken away. And their leader, he had a poster on his head from the Shah, the fascist Shah of Iran, that our government dictated, put in 54, 57. So, it's curious to me that in all the books, the few books that have been written about the state strike, the Iranian students are invisible, and in most of the articles. And there was a mention the other day, well, back then in the strike, there wasn't a whole lot about the plight of the Arabs. And I'm here to tell you a little different. Because that was some of the first efforts of the more militant Palestinian groups coming out and organizing. And there was a Palestinian terrorist, a woman who kidnapped a plane And so that's where part of the terrorist image came from. But it was going on. It was going on campus. And they were really solid, wonderful team. That's all I can say. Yeah.
That tends to be forgotten when we talk about supporters of the strike on campus. And that's the faculty. The first day that we started picketing, there were faculty with us. They stopped teaching their classes and they joined the strike. And what was really frightening for a lot of them was not just the fact that they weren't getting paid, though some of their families didn't like that, but that anyone who did not have tenure risked being let go. And they were. If you were without tenure, you were gone. So that was a little frightening, but they were there from the first. Later on, the American Federation of Teachers, the faculty union, which had been negotiating with the administration for various issues such as teaching load, salary, etc. They supported the strike, but they knew they couldn't get Central Labor Council sanction, having them support the 15 demands. So what they did was they went to the Central Labor Council with their own demands and got sanction from the Labor Council for the strike. Once that occurred, it was very important because at every entrance to the university, where there was a faculty member with a picket sign, no union member would cross. That meant no food deliveries to the doors. That meant no garbage pickup for those who were still deciding they were going to stay on campus. And it was a major factor in helping us get support outside. In addition, the International Longshoremen and Warehousemen's Union supported the strike and gave faculty members on strike who were not getting paid the opportunity to work on the docks and earn money. And some people did. Not all the faculty were capable, but quite a few were. So the faculty were an important contingent as well. My job primarily, after walking the picket line during the day and going to the noon rallies and running from the cops and occasionally having to hit back, was to go and bail people out of jail. Most of you, I hope, are not familiar with the bail system. But what occurs is you put down 10% of what your bail is, and your bail is dependent upon what your charge is. And you have to get collateral for the rest of it just in case you skip bail. Well, during the strike, we had over 700 people arrested. We raised and paid out $75,000 and had to raise collateral of $750,000. That's a lot of money. And I don't know what it would be in terms of dollars today, but it took a lot of effort to get it. We started out with passing the hat, literally. Bail money, money for bail. But as the strike grew, and in particular as the mass bust occurred, the president of the university, Hayakawa, said that 2 or more people on campus constituted an illegal assembly. Well, of course we had to test that, and on January 23rd, when we came back from an early Christmas vacation, the strikers went to the free speech area, the speaker's platform, and held a rally. The police were all around on campus as usual. And they came and they surrounded the people. They just ran, and anyone who could not get out or fight their way out, Steve, he had a big old 2x4, was arrested. About 450 people at one time. That's a lot. People failed buried. The majority of the people had misdemeanors, 125, 250 each. But if you were injured, you were sure to have a felony. If you were a leader, you were sure to have a felony. And those went up as far as $10,000 each. Most of the money came from the San Francisco Bay Area, family, friends, acquaintances. But with the mass bust, a lot of people who were watching the news heard the phone number of the bail office that people were using to remind each other where to call when they got busted. I'll never forget it, 5522811. And people, radio stations started calling the bail office. And I'm sitting there writing out all the forms, because there's a lot of paperwork involved in that. And I'm talking on the phone to various radio stations. And we got a lot of money nationally, including a $100 check from Robert S. McNamara. Anyone know who he is?
Secretary of Defense.
Pardon?
Secretary of Defense.
Secretary of Defense. He had left by that time, and I think he was feeling guilty. Because he sent $100 with the proviso that he would cancel the check if we dared to mention his name. Well, we needed the money, so we didn't care about it. One thing that's important during the strike in the mass bust was something that happened to the people in jail. The men and the women were obviously separated into the various cages. And in the women's group, they took one woman and they were putting her in solitary. I can't remember what the issue was. But the rest of the women were not going to allow it without a fight. And they started screaming, on strike, shut it down. They were banging the bars. You could hear them from out on Bryant Street. Well, they got hosed by the guards. They all came out dripping wet. And it's the first time that ever in the media were women seen as part of the strike. Because, of course, all these young women that are dripping wet, the press loves that. But women were active behind the scenes. The men were the faces of the strike. The women were the backbone. As Terry said, as Crutch said, women did a lot of the work, organizing work, running off the leaflets, not getting to write them. Women ran the bail fund, women ran communications, and women ran legal defense, getting lawyers to work with people after they got out of jail. Women were a major part of the strike, but we were neither seen nor heard by the outside world. And unlike the presidium of the BSU that Terry talked about, there wasn't a top-down effort made to ensure that women got leadership positions in the various organizations. But we were there, and we fought, and we kind of won.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Now we will go to the next topic of the settlement of the strike. And it looks like Jerry may have had to leave, so we're going to have it that presentation, primarily by Roger Alvarado. We tried to have a interpretation and representation from all third row. So due to illness for the Asians part, that wasn't that. And then we had for the blacks, Jerry Bernardo, but he wasn't feeling well, so I believe he left. So Roger will have to make up for everyone. This is Roger Alvarado.
After about 5 months of, actually during the strike, there were different times we were contacted by so-called officials, right? I think the Archbishop of San Francisco wanted a meeting, and so did Joe Alvarado, who was the mayor. We met with both of them individually during the strike to see about making any resolution, and neither one of them had any proposal that even came close to addressing the demands. Alvarado did take a position, however, that since he was the mayor of San Francisco and he had visions of possibly running for the governorship of California, that he wasn't going to allow Ronald Reagan to bring in the National Guard. That did not prevent the counties in the Bay Area from sending officers to the campus to participate in crowd control during the strike. We got to our 5th month in March, and a lawyer who had been a principal litigator for the Black Student Union, Franklin Brand, had been in touch with some of the people from the chancellor's office. And I believe he received an invitation from them to inquire about what it would take to resolve or sit down for negotiations in terms of dealing with the demands with the system. The proposal that was brought forth was that Hayakawa would not be involved. I'm not quite sure what it was that was done with Hayakawa, but what I'm aware of is that he wasn't in the neighborhood when we were having the discussions. And the proposal put forth by the chancellor's office was they would select 6 faculty members from San Francisco State campus would be selected, and they would represent the system. And we would have a corresponding number of people from the Black Student Union and TWLF that would sit on the negotiations. The Black Student Union had at least 2 members selected. I believe Jerry was the one. I can't quite recall who the other individual was. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and Mason, you can correct me, I thought that you were part from the TWLF. How long? Okay, so the TWLF selected another 4 members from the Central Committee to sit in on the negotiations, which were held over a 3-day period at Frank Brandt's house. There were the 6 faculty people, there were no administrators, and we began to talk about the various demands and how they would be addressed in terms of attempting to resolve the strike. And it was, they were pretty extensive. They took a great deal of time. They would start and go 4 to 6 hours pretty rigorously. Finally we came to the 3rd day and had come to a principle of agreement for resolving the strike. Included in the settlement were some changes and some things that we were not able to secure and which eventually got left out. One of them had to do with the changing of the name of the school. We accepted the name of Ethnic Studies rather than Third World Studies because the reality was the importance of getting the school superseded everything else. And the reasoning behind that is because of the structure of the state college system. A department or a lecture series has no autonomy. The first piece of autonomy within the campus is as a school. So being able to have the school identified and established by the system meant that we would have a degree of autonomy that would not be available to us if we were just to be individual departments independent of each other. The second thing that we compromised on, or we did not attain, was that of the rehiring of George Murray in the teaching position. Essentially, the other thing was there was a series of recommendations that were followed up along with responses to the demands. And one of them had to do with an advisory committee from the community being formed for the School of Ethnic Studies. And although that is written into the agreement, that has something that has never come to fruition. Other than that, we felt that what we had was something that was pretty close to what we were going to be able to get from the system. Well, there was a couple of things that were underlying at the time in regards to feeling that the time was for us to make that move. And one of them had to do with the fact that there was some speculation that the system was getting ready to shut the campus down completely and just eliminate or just stop the operation of the campus for whatever duration of time they felt was necessary in order to clean house. And the fact that we had conducted this campaign for 5.5 months, being able to establish the concessions that the system was putting forth, that this was time for us to go ahead and accept it and move on. The consequences for that followed through pretty much as you would expect, with the exception of the kind of revenge that Hayakawa wreaked on the Black Student Union leadership, and the way in which the system manages to co-opt anything that it absorbs. One other aspect about the settlement, none of the campuses in the state college system were universities. A university has this particular status of being able to provide for leadership, but also has the capacity of requiring its instructors to be more in line with not only research, but also publication. As a result, immediately following the announcement of the settlement of the strike, the system announced that certain campuses were going to be identified as universities. This, in part, was a way in which the system was able to appease some of the campuses in terms of going along with the decision to have the negotiated settlement achieved. A consequence of that is that, just like here at San Francisco State in the School of Ethnic Studies, you find that the instructors are now having to be more academically oriented because of the restrictions of being identified as a university faculty or lecturer. And unfortunately, the side effect of that is that the whole connection with the communities, it suffers as a result, with people having to spend too much of their time, faculty having to spend too much of their time being productive in terms of the academic end of it, and rather than looking for connections and projects and programs to conduct with the communities. So. Unfortunately, I don't have them in front of me.
Does anybody have a copy of the demands? What were the demands?
A copy of the demand.
The demands that were met with the establishment of the school, the various departments that were going to exist within the school. It was the retention of the EOP program, the special admissions program. It was a commitment to fulfill the necessary processes that were, up to that point, had halted the development of Black studies initially and third world studies. And that pretty much covers it, right? I mean,
Wasn't there a demand that there be something set up where students and community and faculty would pick faculty?
there was
That
also
was a big stickler with a lot of people.
yeah.
There was a couple of additional demands. One was to rehire George Murray. There was a demand that all black students wishing to be admitted in the fall of 1969, and that Nathan Hare would be given full professorship. Right.
And control of running the Black Police Department there. That was important, because Dr. Hare was considered very radical, which he was. Had a lot of great ideas.
Before Tomasita starts, she's going to be next, and she's going to speak on some issues concerning post-litigation after the strike. How many people have seen the movie or film on the strike? Okay. If you have seen that, you will see there's a brother, his name is Clark Wilson, and he's worked with us, and he was unable to come today due to some illness with his daughter. But I talked with him, and you know, a lot of people had wondered what happened to him, because he was the one that put up a fight with the tax squad, and he was battling one, and then two other guys jumped on him, and I was telling them that people wondered whatever happened to him. So here's the brief report on Clark Wilson. We call him Boo-Ray, that's his nickname. He was arrested, and I had a conversation as well with Don McAllister. That's the heavyset brother. He became our poster boy. They went to jail that same time. Boo-Ray was charged with assault and battery on a police officer, and that was a felony. He later went to court, and that was reduced to a misdemeanor. He had to do 6 months in San Bruno, which is San Francisco's county jail. He did that time. He got out and came back to state and finished and got his degree in mathematics. He transferred to UC Berkeley and applied for his master's in applied mathematics. He worked for a number of years as deputy director of their, I think it's computer engineering department. And he finished up being a stockbroker for Smith Barney. But he continued to be considerate and loyal to the community. And I think all the meetings that we went to, he only missed maybe 1 or 2 out of 6 or 7. So that's the update on Claude Boo-Ray Wilson. Now we will go on to our last panelist, which is Tomasita. And she will be speaking on some of the post-strike litigation issues.
Just on Claude Boo-Ray Wilson, it should be noted that the reason he became a stockbroker was because he came back from serving in Vietnam, that he had so much damage to his body from Agent Orange that it was part of a program that retrained because he had lost vision and other severe physical ailments, and so the Army had a program to retrain veterans in fields where they could make a living, since they had lost the capacity for his previous work, and so that's how a brother from the strike ended up being a stockbroker. And as far as the legal defense, first of all, I'd like to just set the stage that back in the 1960s, the United States was engaged in a war in Vietnam, and I remember myself in high school wondering, like, why are we going over there and killing people who have not done anything to us? If the dollar bill has a motto on it that says, "In God we trust," and the seventh commandment is, "Thou shalt not kill." So why are we killing people over there? That was just my high school thinking, you know. And then the first week of school here, there were these demonstrations. They used to round people up. Now I want to just share with you the draft. See, the government is very slick now. What they do now is that it's a voluntary army, but the people who are in it are people who have very little economic opportunity. They're people who grow up in places, like Merced, or places where there's nothing to do except go in the military because there's no other opportunities. So now there's another sneaky way to catch people and get them to join the military. But back then, there was a draft, and so there was a lottery. So your name could come up, and then you would be drafted. And what they would do is they would take busloads of people over to the Oakland Induction Center and shave their heads and do whatever they do when they induct people into the military. So Joan Baez and a bunch of pregnant women, my first week of college, in 1966, they said that these women had been blocking the doors to the induction center in Oakland, and they would bring the people over there at 4 o'clock in the morning, these busloads of people being forced into the military. And so these ladies were blocking the entrance, thinking that, pregnant women, how could the police beat up pregnant women? But then the newspaper said that the police were beating their bellies. And so I had come out of Catholic school. I was a liberal, just trying to figure out what's going on in the world. But when I read that they actually had beaten pregnant women in the door of the induction center, I went to see for myself. I couldn't believe it, And so the next morning, I went over there at 4 o'clock in the morning with thousands of other people, and that's the day I got radicalized, because it really was true. The police formed this huge formation and came at us. This one guy said, like I said, I was coming out of Catholic school, so I said to this policeman that was right in front of me, because we were in a standoff, and I said, brother, we could have been receiving communion at the last Sunday together. And he just took his big stick and he just started beating it in front of my eyes, like threatening me, not responding to my attempt at some sort of common humanity. But anyway, so the reason I wanted to set the tone was because there was excitement in the air. Right when the strike broke, there was the whole country, like there was resistance. People were getting messed over. Their family members were being drafted, being forced to go kill and be killed. And so we were just coming out of the 60s, where a lot of people took psychedelics and had all their chakras blown open, and so realized how that we are all human beings, just our common humanity. Because in the 50s, there was so much, during the Cold War, the culture was such that everybody just wore the same hairdo and wore the same clothes and didn't say hello to anybody. And then in the 60s, because of what happened here in San Francisco, when they said free love movement, that meant you loved everybody in humanity without expecting something in return. You just loved all of humanity. That's what free love meant. But okay, so we were coming out of that, and so then in the late 60s, here on campus, there was that feeling of rebellion everywhere. And so what was key about the strike's success, because mind you, we have a diverse place now, but that's probably a lot to do with the strike, because when we first came on campus, there were no courses at all about the viewpoint, the context of the people of color of this world. There were no courses in the history of Latin America. There was one class on the history of Latin America that was taught by a retired oil executive who had worked for Standard Oil in Brazil. That's the viewpoint. The corporate Western European viewpoint that capitalism is good and that the invasion was good, that was the frame of reference for everything taught, just like it is in most schools everywhere to this day. But that's what it was here. There was that one class in History of Latin America, and the same guy taught Spanish, and that was it. There was no other presence. You know, there were no Filipino faculty telling the reality of what is the Filipino reality, what was the Chinese experience in relation to the Constitution, which is a class I took here. So we had to fight because, for example, most of the students of color, the few that there were wealthy students from Africa or wealthy students from Latin America. But because of the tracking system, which was in existence at that time, which is that in grammar school, the public schools decided whether you were meant to go to college or if you were meant to be a car mechanic. And so then the students of color would get tracked into non-college preparatory classes. So if they decided they wanted to go to college, they wouldn't have been prepared, because when they graduated from high school, they had been tracked to go into a job that had to do with, like I said, being a car mechanic instead of being able to go to college. So that was the tone, that was the feeling. So the reason we won is because the people on campus had voted in a progressive slate, and we had created some programs with the associated student money. Instead of going to the sororities and the varsity, the funds that everybody paid $10 in to be the associated students, those monies had gone to create certain programs, such as draft help and the experimental college and community services institute, which did community organizing. And so those programs had already established a link into the communities, because our mentality was all about, we were at the university to develop our minds in service of our communities. So there was a strong link. So then when the strike was called, we already knew people all over the city. We had already served in the tutorial programs or in their communities, in our own respective communities. And so that's why we succeeded, because there was community people, and it was faculty, and it was students. So the strike, we had to form a legal defense committee when the first time that the tactical squad, which was created by the mayor to pick on us, and they were given 3-foot-long hardwood sticks, and Nesbitt Crutchfield had just come out of the Quonset hut where the Black Student Union Central Committee was meeting, and the tactical squad charged him, and they hit him, and he just landed on his, sprawled on the ground with his glasses broken, and we all ran. But that night, when we had our coordinating meeting, so they said, well, now the people are getting arrested, we have to have a legal defense committee. So I raised my hand, because I had always wanted to be a lawyer, and I had dreamed of being the first woman Supreme Court Justice. And so I raised my hand, and then the BSU asked Roy Harrison to help me, and so we started the Legal Defense Committee. A minister from one of the black churches in Plymouth Street offered his place for a center, and in the end, we ended up calling up every lawyer in the phone book, because we needed to get lawyers for 700 people who got arrested. But the last thing I want to share with you is that the day that 416 people got arrested in the mass arrest, because this is what had happened, we had called for statewide show of support. So people came from as far as San Diego, Sacramento, Los Angeles, Fresno, to show support for the cause of a college of ethnic studies. And that's the day that Hayakawa ordered everybody surrounded and trapped and arrested on the basis of illegal assembly, etc. So my strategy was, I had the idea to tell each of the defendants to demand an independent trial, because then they would cost the city so much money that they would never have a mass arrest again. And indeed, so we used to have these defendants meetings every Friday night in the basement of Sacred Heart Church, because by then we had moved to a bigger space. And so we made that announcement. We asked everybody when they were arraigned the following week, to demand an independent trial. And so what ended up happening is that the 469 people were tried in groups of 10. So that's 46 trials in groups of 10. And we tied up all the courtrooms in City Hall for 2.5 years. And they never did another mass arrest until the first Iraq invasion, that war, when all the kids with purple hair went up on the Bay Bridge and stopped traffic on the Bay Bridge, and so they arrested all those kids, and the next day they were arraigned in front of Judge Ronald Geoge, who had been a leader in the strike. So Ron Geoge, of course, dismissed the case. So those are the only two. So that's the story on the mass arrests and on that strategy. And congratulations to Ron Geoge for all his years of service as a judge. He was appointed in the first incarnation of Jerry Brown when Jerry Brown was still progressive.
Tomasita, you're going to have to. I think we have about just 10 minutes for questions and answers. I'm sorry I had to cut you off, but we do want to deal with some question and answer. So are there any questions? Okay.
Hi, how are you guys doing today? First and foremost, I want to say thank you because I have an Africana majors study, so I want to say thank you for you guys' efforts for opening up the doors for everybody who wants to study this. And second, I just want to know, are you guys still active in the community today?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to fight the City College, and please everybody pay attention because there's a very, very vile, evil plot to really shut down City College, and the trustees are not defending the interests of the people, and they're just betraying the interests of the people. They run as progressives, but once they get in there, that's their ticket to be politicians for the rest of their lives. And so they just go along with the chancellor wants, and the chancellor says that the real estate that the Ocean Avenue campus is on is too valuable to be used as an educational institution. He's trying to make it all online, and that's why they're trying to give the lower parking lot to the developer, and it's a big lie that they say it's going to be 50% affordable, and it's not, and it shouldn't be privatized and given to a private developer anyway. So we're trying to save the college, so we need help on that cause too. And you know what? If you have love in your heart for your community, it's going to be a life. Don't think that when you graduate, that's the end of it. That's just the beginning. Now you're going to be an instrument of service to your people, and it gives you great satisfaction and happiness in life, but it never ends because the other side doesn't quit. They come up with new stuff like constantly.
I'd like to say that after I graduated, I went on to get my doctorate, and I taught from 1980 until about 6 years ago. I taught international relations. And that's where I did a lot of organizing. My students used to complain that I took the cruel mask of innocence off their faces because I told them the truth. And they never thought they would ever hear that. Those that were political and those that were like, what? We did that? So my community was my campus and my students. And as I said, they really became politicized. I have a lot of them now. One of them was in global exchange. Some of them have gone back home to their home countries, and they are working there. And I'm really proud of that. Other than that, it's really kind of hard to politicize in the middle of junior football.
George.
Yeah. Well, after the strike, my assignment for myself for community involvement is the community university. And I taught here for 30 years. And throughout the time, to make sure that the community perspective and the service to community would be in our program. And that was my active involvement. So after my retirement, my involvement is basically drinking coffee in the coffee shop and talking to people my age, reading the English newsletters or letter from IRS, government that they don't understand. So what I see is that you cannot but be active in the community. It's just mainly what your commitments are, what you can do. And I personally, and I want to emphasize personally that once you pass a certain age, and I used to think it's 30, but when I met my wife, I was 29, so I moved to 35. You should not stay in leadership position in all these activities. You should be supportive. So I still hold to that, and I think we need young people to be leaders. We need young people to put fresh ideas. So whatever we did, we had to do it, and whatever we did should not be just perpetuated. It should be improved.
I finished my BA in the English department and continued to raise hell in that department because what a lot of people haven't said about some of the teachers at State, maybe even a majority, is a lot of them were craven cowards. And they hid from it, they resisted it, and when the strike was over, they went back to business as usual. And I did a survey of the English department, very popular, strong department. They had 50 courses, 500 books. Those were the days when you read one book a week. And of the 500 books, they had 2 by black writers. Latino, Asian American, Native American, forget it. So the 2 books were Richard Wright's Uncle Native Son and Invisible Man. Both, by the way, which end with the black man either about to get fried or totally isolated. Just for your interest's sake. Also, the teacher said, we can't do Native American literature because Native Americans don't have a written language. And I said, well, for one thing, there was Chief Sequoyah of the Cherokee tribe who developed the whole language long ago. And secondly, the person who won the Pulitzer Prize this year in '68 is a Kiowa Comanche who teaches at the University of New Mexico named Scott Monaday, and his book is called The House of Dawn. So go sit on it. And after that, I just worked at Kaiser Hospital, and I wrote a book of stories about race and class at Kaiser and other hospitals I worked at through college, and became a writer. And I'm finishing a book about certain strike I was involved in '68 with my friends here. I hope I do you all justice.
You will or you will find out.
Yeah, she says I will or I'll find out about it.
Okay, we got about a couple more minutes. Roger?
Yeah, after spring of 1969, I got involved with putting together or helping to organize a little Assembly Defense Committee for 7 Latino brothers who were accused of killing a cop in San Francisco. I stayed with the organization for about 18 months, at which time I had become convicted of draft evasion because I refused to go to war in Vietnam. I wound up leaving the organization shortly after that. Got involved in schools in Oakland and helped to organize 6 years of elementary school called Escuelita in Oakland. Since then, I've been sitting on I've sat on some boards in junior high schools in Oakland, which is a really discouraging experience. It's one of those things where the people who have everything have infused themselves into the system to ensure that the monies that come through that are supposed to be made available to everyone in Oakland gets funneled to just the specific school sites and specific programs. You have some schools at the foothills of Oakland that are just brimming over with money, and you have other schools that are being shut down because there's supposedly no money. It's really a horrendous situation and really unfortunate because there's so much denial going on in regards to poor people and people of color in Oakland. Just to mention one of the issues, right? The other thing that really I think is a concern for me anyway is the situation of what's happening with the separation of children from their parents in the immigration issue, right? Which is the consequences. You know, when Jimmy mentioned having to pay 50 years for what's going on, That's bullshit. It's gonna be generational, and it's gonna go on and on and on as a result of these activities by this government. I just simply urge anybody who can provide any kind of assistance to getting things to these youngsters and their family to please do so, because they are desperately needed. Thank you.
So I can only imagine that during the strike you guys had to go through a lot of things and it took a lot of effort, but did you guys ever go through a period of time where you doubted yourselves or you wanted to stop striking or quit? But did you ever want to stop striking? Did you ever have any doubts? No, you didn't? You knew that you wanted what you wanted? You were going to get it no matter what?
I was fucking scared. It wasn't something you just did on Monday to Friday. I mean, you did this 7 days a week. You know, people talk about 24/7 as though the techies invented it. That's nonsense, right? I mean, this stuff, and you live with this, right? You live with it to the point where, like, I had no place to stay. I didn't have my own place. You know, whatever clothes I had on my back. I would stay at people's houses until they got tired and told me to leave, right? You know, and that whole thing about being stopped all the time and being made to sit in the back of a police car for hours, you know. Okay, so years after this is all over, right? I'm walking home, I'm walking down Fifth Street, I get stopped. They pull me over, they say, okay, well, we got an outstanding warrant. Okay, it's an indecent exposure. I said, what? He says, yeah, he says, well, turns out that I had been at an anti-war demonstration in Berkeley, and I had called Nixon a motherfucking liar who ought to be hung by his neck. And that was the indecent exposure. So, yeah, you know, concern, prayer, all the time.
Okay, is there more student questions?
Yeah, I was just going to say, what we have is a movement, a mass movement. And when you have a mass movement, it changes the reality. People feel they're not alone, they can fight back. We have to build again a mass movement in this country. We're not going to stop these racist bullies and terrorists like Trump with legal means. I mean, as far as, there has to be a mass movement to put him out. There should be a general strike. But you know, that's the kind of mass movement that we need in this country. That has to be organized, and I think that's what we were able to organize successfully in the San Francisco State strike against mass police repression and against attacks on us. But I wanted to also introduce a brother here from the farm workers who joined us. Al Rojas is one of the founders of the farm workers, and he is fighting now today, and I'm supporting it, to fight for the farm workers in Baja, California. There's 70,000 farm workers in Baja, paid $7 a day, them and their families. So this struggle against slave labor right on our border is going on. It's an international struggle, and they were pushed off the land by NAFTA, which privatized the ejido. So maybe you can say a few words, Al?
Yes. Well, thank you, Steve. I think I've been learning, you know, at least the time I've been here. I want to thank the panelists for opening up the whole idea of struggle as it relates to struggle of farm workers in this state since the early 1930s. Strikes that, you know, were pretty much promoted and organized by what they called back then, and still do, is communists and socialists. And the bottom line is that even today, I think, you know, this whole question of it's a repetition of what you say, the movement of the 60s was like a tremendous thing for many of us who went out to boycott. Back then, many of you probably know about the Great Boycott, how it took, you know, that kind of, you know, whole thing of activism. And it reminds me of some of the things that I've heard you talk about this strike. And there's no difference when it comes to a system that goes after you, and irregardless of whoever you are. But the bottom line is, once that happens, we all become brothers and sisters in struggle. That's what happened, I think, during the 60s when you had the feminist movement, you had the farm workers movement, the civil rights movement, and the anti-war movement. were really eye-openers for us, because after they, burned the cities, there was a reason why they burned the cities back east, as we came in to say, having basically, my opinion, having lost a strike in California because of the judicial system, the court injunctions, imprisoning a lot of our people, in some cases police killing farmers. So I'm just saying that, what I've been able to hear the short time I've been here, I just want to thank all of you for this whole thing, but also that don't forget that the struggle goes on, and the struggle will continue to go on, because the brother said, things are not going to get better. And if they don't get better, we don't reach out to the youth, the young people, universities, especially in colleges, even high schools. When you talked about my education, when I thought I could go to college, I went to my counselor, he says, Al, it's too bad that you got stuck for 4 years in vocational trades, and now you want to go to college? There's no way you're going to be able to go to college. I said, why not? You were not put in those programs to be prepared for college. So to me, that was a downfall on the part of the whole question of, my attaining some education other than my high school. So I just think that some of these panels, it's like I've always said, if we don't talk to each other and we don't share a lot of our experiences in life, then many of you who are teachers and professors, but you're more than that. You're basically teachers and teaching to begin dialogue and brainstorming and getting to young people to do them. I want to thank you. But anyway,
all right, thank you.
Boycott fiscals.
Thank you. I think we got one last question. Hey, your mic's not on.
Oh, I see. Should I turn it on?
There's another one here.
He can do this. Thank you. So, I am an international student. I am from Canada. I came to SFSU for a lot of reasons, but this is one of them. The fact that you guys have fought the real fight, and the fact that a lot of things can happen when people come together, and all that. But as I've been here the past, this is my last semester, and I'm realizing that however much people want to fight for what's good, it's kind of hard now, the students right now, because I feel like we live in the Bay Area where you have to pay, like slave away your whole life to be able to pay for the rent. And like you have school and you're afraid that you're going to fail, you're going to be kicked out, I'm afraid of the police. So what do you, what advice do you give us who want to build communities and want to, fight for what is right and, put in the work, how do you build communities? How do you make sure that, what do you do? How do you make sure that, you're okay? How do you give tabs to each other? What did you do that, can keep standing? And yeah, that's pretty much all.
I think the key is to find people who are in your same situation, your same perspective, and to begin to look at dialogue, as well as what you can do to assist each other to survive in this area. I mean, the cost of living here is not just horrendous; it's ongoing, right? And I think that there are examples in the Bay Area which you might want to look into. One of them is the Rainbow store, I think, which is down in was it Harrison, Folsom? 14th and Folsom. There's the cheese factory, I believe, over in Berkeley. There's a couple of other cooperatives that have been put together that are people working together to be able to sustain themselves. And a little bit more than that. I mean, and that's what I suggest. That's why I make that suggestion, because here are people who are finding that they have commonality to the point where they can work together and they can produce things together. They can provide for each other and find ways to move over. Right? I really believe that the notion that you start with what you have and you work from there is really well grounded, because your needs will define for you what's going to work, and you're paying attention to them by going through that process. And I think what happens out of that is you're able to identify more people like yourself, as well as people are able to identify with you and follow through with your practices, as well as to contribute. Right? One of the things that's always impressed me is the amount of potential in terms of the resources that are out there. If people get into the process of sharing with one another commonality, right? And that by going through that process and establishing those kind of relationships, it is limitless what's available out there and where we're going to go. The other side of it is that you wind up proving what works and what doesn't work. You get a chance to realize not only your successes, but your mistakes, to reevaluate what you're doing, and then to move on to the next point. So,
Let me close hopefully with a bit of humor. At the Central Committee meetings, we would have George Colbert, who worked with the legal defense, to come in every night to report to us who the warrants were out. Because if there was warrants out for you, that meant that you couldn't go home. And we had to have a network of safe houses, okay? So there was a brother on the Central Committee from Trinidad named Jack Alexis. And so he sit in several meetings and he just couldn't hold it back no more. He said, "Brothers, do you know this brother named John Doe? He must be a bad motherfucker. He's got," he said, "I counted, he must have about 20 warrants after him. I never met him. Who is he?"
Don't touch.
The Central Committee, it just went up. And somebody told Jack, he said, "Fool, that might be you." I'd like to close with that.